It can be terrifying for a parent to discover that their child has a severe mental illness and the difficulties it will cause them in a life. However, because they're parents, they never believed that this illness would cause their kid to do something to hurt them, right? Melanie Davies did the best that she could with the cards she was dealt, but to her son Zachary, it wasn't good enough. It wasn't just Zachary's crimes that made him famous, but the world-famous interview that put him on the map as one of the evilest killers in history.
It was this wet thumping sound.
Zachary Davis was born in July 1997 to his parents, Melanie and Chris. His brother Josh is a year older than him, and according to him, they always got along super well. However, tragedy struck the family when Chris passed away in 2007 after a painful battle with ALS, sometimes known as Lou Gehrig's disease. Y'all remember the Ice Bucket Challenge? That's the illness it was raising awareness for. ALS is a disease that affects the nerves in your brain and spine, over time slowly causing people to lose control of their muscles. Eventually, Chris wasn't able to talk or feed himself before he sadly passed away. It is a horrible illness and naturally left his sons traumatized when it finally claimed his life. After Chris passed away, there was noticeable changes in Zachary, and not the normal grieving son kind of change. No, whatever was going on in Zachary's head was way more extreme. The family moved to Tennessee for a fresh start, and just a few months later, Melanie took Zachary to a psychiatrist. He told his doctor that he was hearing voices, and while it was obvious Zachary was suffering from a mental illness, they never got to treat it. For some unknown reason, Melanie stopped taking Zachary to his appointments, and he was left untreated, his symptoms slowly growing worse and worse. Because of his issues, Zachary became your typical teenage outcast. One of his former classmates actually took to Reddit to answer questions about him. The info they gave was pretty enlightening. They claimed that Zachary was far from normal. He never smiled and wore the exact same hooded sweatshirt every day, no matter what the weather was. However, no matter how strange he might have been, nobody suspected Zachary of being evil. But what was it that turned Zachary from a typical outcast to someone that people have called a monster? Well, I'll tell you. On August 10th, 2012, Melanie, along with her two sons, went to the movies to watch The Campaign, the most popular comedy of the year. Everything seemed totally normal. They all enjoyed the movie and went home. Neither Melanie nor Josh knew that before the night ended, they were intended to die. In a journal that the detectives would later discover, it turns out Zachary was planning to commit his heinous crimes days before it took place. Melanie went to bed at 9 p.m. and Josh went into his own room soon after. While they did this, Zachary was getting prepared. He packed a backpack and a satchel with spare clothes, a toothbrush, ski mask, notebooks, gloves, and a claw hammer. It was like he was packing to go on the run, which is exactly what he planned to do. But before he did that, he did something that nobody saw coming. As his family slept, Zachary went into the garage and retrieved a sledgehammer. Then, he went into his mom's room and started swinging. According to the coroner, Melanie was at least 8 times before she tragically lost her life. Zachary hid the soaked sledgehammer in the laundry room and moved to the next stage of his plan, getting rid of Josh. He took a bottle of whiskey and poured it all over the games room before setting it alit, closing the door. Later on in his diary, he wrote that he did that so that Josh would have to suffer. Except that isn't what happened. Closing the door was Zachary's big mistake and a miracle for Josh. The door stopped the fire from spreading to the rest of the house, but there was enough smoke to activate the fire alarm. Josh awoke to the smell of smoke, and before he ran out to save himself, he ran to his mom's room to find her face completely disfigured and the whole room covered in her blood. Josh ran to the neighbor's house for help, and they called the cops, who immediately started searching for Zachary. They caught up with him 5 hours later as he was walking along the side of the road. He was pretty difficult to miss since he was covered in blood and all. Now, I don't understand what the cops were expecting when they arrested the teen who just tried to kill his whole family. I don't even think they could predict the madness that is Zachary Davy. Later, a doctor who evaluated Zachary said he was a case unlike any she'd seen before. I've never encountered someone so severely detached from his emotions. Before long, news of the horrific crime became big news, and everyone was eager for any and all details about the remorseless teen killer. It wasn't just the brutality of the crime, but how Zachary was responding to the situation. Sometimes he would smirk, smile, or even laugh when discussing with investigators what he did that night, and things didn't make any more sense once he went to trial. But before that, Zachary made a decision that would make him one of the most famous killers of the 21st century. He agreed to an interview interview with Dr. Phil to discuss the details of his crime before he'd even gone to trial. This allowed the world a glimpse into Zachary's strange mind. Dr. Phil asked Zachary some very blunt questions about his crime, stuff you'd only expect to hear under examination in court.
Did you kill your mother?
Yeah.
They talked at length about the details of that gruesome night, Zachary's motives, and what was going through his head that day. You can watch most of the episode on Dr. Phil's YouTube channel, and I really recommend that you do. I've never seen anyone quite like Zachary before. Honestly, you guys, it's hard to remember a lot of the interview because, well, what I remember most clearly is him. His eyes are totally blank, and the way he slowly nods his head, his creepy voice, it's like he's the villain in a horror movie. The worst part of all, by far, is when he laughs.
What did it sound like?
There was this wet thumping sound.
How disturbing is that? This interview put Zachary's crime on the map, and he was given the nickname the Sledgehammer Killer. Clips of the interview went viral online, garnering over 13 million views on YouTube alone. This really didn't do Zachary any favors. If anything, it gave him just more negative press. And did he care what the public thought of him? It's hard to say. Seems like he doesn't really care about anything. As you can imagine, the response to the interview wasn't positive. Most people were really disturbed by Zachary, the crime, and just everything to do with it. Some people even theorized that he was possessed by a demon, and that's why he was speaking with a creepy voice. I think it's pretty normal to try and find excuses for why people do these things, you know? Especially when it's someone Zachary's age. You can blame it on mental illness, possession, but ultimately, it doesn't take away from the fact that he ended someone's life. The life of his own mom. Still, despite his unnerving and revealing TV appearance, the case went forward to trial as planned. There's a couple of things to keep in mind here. One, Zachary confessed to his crimes. The police knew exactly what he did and had more than enough evidence to convict. Second, this is clearly someone who is not mentally well, and there has been a lot of debate whether he should have been declared fit to stand trial. Even with that in mind, the state decided to try him as an adult for the severity of the murder. It became clear pretty quickly that despite his confession, Zachary was trying everything in the book to either get him off the hook or reduce his sentence. He claimed that part of the reasoning for his crime was the fact that he'd been violated by his brother Josh. This was a shocking statement, especially since to the knowledge of everyone around them, they were just a happy family. Josh took to the stand to appear as a witness and was confronted with this claim, which he strongly denied. There was nothing that supported Zachary's claims except his own word. As we would later learn, this was not a reliable source of information, especially when it came to his brother. He told the court that he committed the crime because the voices in his head told him to.
You tell the judge, do you recognize that voice?
It's the voice of my father.
That fact alone almost brings this case full circle. If his dad hadn't passed away, would he have started hearing his dad's voice in his head? If he'd kept seeing the doctor, would it have gone away? Sadly, we'll never know. By all accounts, Melanie was a great mom who loved both her sons very much. She was ambitious, active, and known to be an all-around good person. This is somewhat supported by some of Zachary's diary entries after her passing. My only true regret was that I didn't give her a faster death. I didn't want her to suffer. And then, a couple of days into the trial, something totally weird happened. Zachary changed his story. This seemed to come as a surprise to literally everyone, including his own attorneys. During the trial, in front of the jury, Zachary suddenly declared that he wasn't responsible for his mom's death at all. He claimed he was covering for Josh, the true culprit. According to reports of the trial, this left everyone in the room totally dumbfounded. Even his own attorney confronted Zachary about this change in the story, reminding him that he'd confessed to the murder many times. His plea of innocence was discarded and honestly was just another prime example of how detached from this situation he was. His attorney's main defense was Zachary is clearly mentally ill, so much so that he doesn't know right from wrong and was totally controlled by his psychosis. Unsurprisingly, after a 4-day trial, Zachary was found guilty of first-degree homicide. He was sentenced to 71 years behind bars, meaning he'll be 88 years old when he's eligible for parole. He'll probably pass away in prison, and to be honest, that may be the best thing for everyone in this situation.
The fact that not only are 5 people dead, he was planning a mass shooting.
We've all had difficult times with our families, but can you imagine waking up one day and deciding to end it all? This is the tragic story of Nehemiah Griego's family of 5. Nehemiah was just 15 years old when he decided to take the life of his mother, father, and 3 younger siblings. After leaving a nightmare in his home, he went straight to church and surrendered. It's a really chilling story, so without further ado, let's dive into the teen who killed his entire family of 5, then went to church. Nehemiah Griego was born in 1997 as the first child of Greg and Sarah, but not the first child of Greg. His dad had 5 children from a previous marriage, and he would go on to have 5 more with his second wife, Sarah. But that's not the most curious thing about Greg's past. Greg had fallen into a life of and gangs after a stint in the 82nd Airborne Division, and was later transformed when he became a Christian while in jail in California in the early 1990s. That's right, Greg had a troubled past himself, but he decided to put it to good use, becoming a jail minister and doing this job for 13 years at the Bernalillo County Metropolitan Detention Center. According to his family, Greg grew up in extreme poverty with his mother, brother, and 2 sisters near Avenida Cesar Chavez and 8th Street Southwest. Although Greg renounced his criminal past, he was still keen on having a traditional family, and that often entailed being tough, especially on the boys. His eldest daughter, Annette, said he liked his daughters to have long hair because he thought it looked pretty, and he liked his sons to be tough. Greg and his wife Sarah were pretty strict parents, according to his family. From a very young age, the children were involved in the church community at Calvary of Albuquerque. Greg worked there as a pastor for years until a falling out. Greg's children also weren't allowed to date until a later age, and Greg kept guns in the house, claiming the family needed to be prepared in case of a burglary. This was the excuse for Greg to teach his young children how to use guns. One of the Griego's neighbors described Greg in a most chilling way.
I think he was a tyrant, and the kids under that type pressure, I didn't see any sign of love among them.
It's a tough description, but it just might explain what happened in January 2013. On the night of January 19th, 2013, Nehemiah picked up his father's .22 caliber rifle and went into his parents' bedroom. Only his mother, Sarah, was there sleeping, as Greg was working night shifts at the time. First, he shot his mother in the head. He later claimed that he was frustrated with his mother after they'd had a fight from the previous evening. Shortly after he committed this horrible act on his mother, at around 1 a.m., Nehemiah texted a picture of his mother's body to his 12-year-old girlfriend. She also happened to be a secret from his family, as they disapproved of their children dating. The gunshot also woke up Nehemiah's brother, Zephaniah. He came into the parents' bedroom and asked Nehemiah what was going on. Nehemiah calmly told his 9-year-old brother that he had just ended their mother's life. Zephaniah didn't believe him, so Nehemiah lifted his mother's head, a very gory sight at that point, to show his brother. Zephaniah became immediately upset, and Nehemiah didn't want to hear any of it. He proceeded to shoot his little brother in the head as well, then went over to his little sister's bedroom. He did the same to the 5-year-old Yael and the 2-year-old Angelina in the head. But the night was not over for Nehemiah. He switched weapons, this time taking his dad's AR-15 semi-automatic and quietly waiting for his dad to come home. At around 5 a.m., Greg came home from an overnight shift at the Albuquerque Rescue Mission, the homeless shelter he had been working at. Nehemiah let him walk around the house for a bit to realize what had just happened, and then giving him the same fate as the rest of his family. But this was not the end of Nehemiah's night of terror.
Investigators believe the boy wasn't done yet, saying he reloaded the AR-15 and the .22 caliber rifle and put them with more ammo into the family minivan. Investigators say he wanted to come to this Walmart. Why? According to the criminal complaint, to murder more people in a populated area and then die in a gunfight with police.
But for some reason, Nehemiah changed his mind. and decided to drive to the local church first. There, he met his 12-year-old girlfriend. After ending his entire family, Nehemiah and his girlfriend hung out at the church's skate park, basketball courts, and local bookstore. Apparently, Nehemiah told his girlfriend to tell people that his whole family died in a car accident. Obviously, she knew what he had done, since he had sent her a picture of his dead mother. Later that afternoon, Pastor Justin Marbury felt something was off. There were no signs of Nehemiah's usually present family, and Nehemiah was acting odd.
I'm watching out for the church, for the people here, and part of that is paying attention.
Do you think paying attention made a difference here?
I think taking it seriously and following through did.
The pastor asked Nehemiah what had happened to his family, and all the boy could say was that his family was dead. Apparently, Nehemiah said he went home and discovered his family had died. However, he couldn't explain why he didn't call the police. Pastor Justin immediately notified police officer Vince Harrison, who ironically was just leading a drill on what to do if a shitter goes loose inside a church. As soon as Vince saw Nehemiah, he realized he was guilty.
Just his behavior was real quiet and cold and a matter of fact. And the red flags started going up.
Vince and Justin then took Nehemiah in Vince's car and drove straight to his house to check if what he was saying was true. A mile from the house, Vince knew what Nehemiah had done. He told him to stay in the car and went over to the house himself. What he found there was the stuff of nightmares.
Thinking about it, does it send chills up my spine? I'm not sure if he came here for help. This is what he knew. This was his life away from his home.
Indeed, that was the question that bothered everyone. If Nehemiah's plan was to continue his killing spree until the police shot him down, why did he decide to stop by the church first? Was this a silent cry for help? Well, luckily, his church pit stop meant that Vince and Justin could put an end to what could have become a town-wide mass murder. As soon as he was arrested, Nehemiah Griego admitted to the murders. He added that he had thoughts about taking his own life and about taking other people's lives. According to the police, his tone of voice was calm and chilling, except when he was talking about his video games. This was when his face lightened. Apparently, Nehemiah was very much into violent video games at the time, and he had become a pretty quiet teenager. Perhaps, incredibly, what was left of Nehemiah's family supported him fiercely throughout the following months. His sister Annette, his aunt Regina, his uncle Eric all spoke for giving Nehemiah a second chance and making him look like a scared kid who didn't know what he was doing. His uncle Eric, who was Greg's brother and a former Democratic senator, said, "It's clear to those of us who know and love him that something went terribly wrong. Whether it was a mental breakdown or some deeper undiagnosed psychological issue, we can't be sure yet. What we do know is that none of us, even in our wildest nightmare, could have imagined that he could do something like this." Although it's certain something clicked in Nehemiah's head one day, this was not an impulsive mass murder. It was premeditated, and his original plan was much worse. Nehemiah reportedly told the police that he planned to shoot his mother, his father, his siblings, and his girlfriend's family before driving to the Walmart and shooting everyone there. That was his plan, and apparently, he had made dark comments to people around him for about a week before actually doing it. Yeah. We don't think this is what a confused teenager behaves like. But his family found a way to turn events against the police. When he was arrested, Nehemiah agreed to speak with the investigators without an attorney or an adult present. The interview lasted about 90 minutes, during which Nehemiah told the police about his love of video games, including Modern Warfare and Grand Theft Auto. He also told the police about his big mass murder plan. But Eric Griego criticized the police for letting Nehemiah give a statement without advice from an adult. No lawyer, no adult, no access to any family members? He makes a statement. If that's not damaging enough, for us, the hardest thing is that became fact. The police presented Nehemiah's confession as evidence that he had planned to go on a spree after murdering his parents. Of course, that added to a much higher charge. Eric added that if any of Nehemiah's family members would have been inside the interview room with him, they would have told him how to formulate his answers better. As far as we know, that whole narrative that he was going on this grandiose shoot was based on a scared 15-year-old in the middle of the night in the sheriff's department. No parent, no adult, no lawyer. Should he have said it? Of course not. If any of us would have been there, we would have told him to just shut up. What exactly was Eric doing? picturing his nephew as a scared 15-year-old, he had just butchered his brother, sister-in-law, and 3 nephews and nieces. First of all, Eric was a politician, and in his statement, he asked the media not to use Nehemiah as a pawn for ratings or to score political points. Second of all, Nehemiah's family didn't want him tried as an adult, and their pleas worked, as Nehemiah was initially tried as a juvenile. A children's court judge initially found Nehemiah to be amenable to treatment and sentenced him as a juvenile after he pleaded guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder and 3 counts of intentional child abuse resulting in death. But in March 2018, as Nehemiah was getting close to his 21st birthday, people started debating whether he should be released so soon. The legal experts did not agree that any teen should get a lighter sentence just because he's a teen.
There are lots of arguments here that teens aren't fully developed and can't be held accountable for their crimes. What do you say?
Yes, that is true. That does not apply in this case. This is somebody that's going to act in an outrageous way again. There's no doubt in my mind.
The legal experts criticized the law for making it so easy for dangerous teens to leave prison on their 21st birthdays. Dr. Drew suggested holding the judge and defense attorneys accountable in case Nehemiah goes out and kills again. Indeed, before long, the Attorney General's office appealed the decision to let Nehemiah go free. Just 11 days before Nehemiah was set to be released, the New Mexico Court of Appeals ordered the judge to hold another hearing and take into account the horrifying nature of the teen's crimes.
Chris, and this is what the Attorney General is doing on this appeal. The focus, the heinous nature of this crime, the fact 2 adults, 3 children dead, the fact that it was premeditated, the fact that not only are 5 people dead, he was planning a mass shooting.
Nehemiah was finally tried as an adult and given 3 life sentences and another 7 years for killing both of his parents. As Nehemiah got credit for the almost 7 years already spent in prison, he will serve another 30 years before he could be released on parole. But once again, his attorney and family are defending Nehemiah, saying he was open to changing his ideas and behavior. Nehemiah's aunt, Regina, particularly speaks up for mental health, and for seeing Nehemiah as a person whose mental health has been improving over the last few years.
First of all, he's young and cognitively, and to me, he's a child. And then secondly, there's some mental impairment.
Regina went on to help Nehemiah recover. Nehemiah was diagnosed with psychosis and dissociative disorders and has started taking medication.
Now he has a full range of emotion. He's missing his family. He obviously cries a lot about what happened.
Regina insisted that Nehemiah should get treatment in a professional mental health care facility, not prison, and that there truly is hope for her nephew. She advises all parents to watch out for their children's mental health, to spot and address any problems before they create a full-blown crisis. This could happen to you. I would advise parents to get smart on mental health. We're doing it now after the crisis. Do it before the crisis. Indeed, Nehemiah might just be a tragic case resulting from tough parenting, violent video games, and guns in the house. Perhaps his family could have avoided this massacre if they knew what was going on inside his mind. But whatever the case or age, Nehemiah must atone for his actions. Should Nehemiah serve his full sentence? And is there any hope for redemption in his case? Crystal would later remember seeing her brothers wearing body armor and having multiple knives laying on the bed. She heard Michael ask his brother, "Should we do it now?" And Robert said yes. The 2 killer brothers then went room by room, unleashing their attack on their family members. There are things in this world that are so messed up that you can think it would only happen in nightmares. Like your brother or sister taking out your entire family. Is that even possible? Sadly, for this family, it became a reality one night, and they never saw it coming. This is the story of the teen brothers who killed 5 family members for fame. On July 22, 2015, police in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, received a very distressing 911 call from a boy who claimed that his brother was attacking his family.
Broken Arrow 911. Hello? Hi, where are you at? Broken Arrow, Oklahoma 7411. What address? 709 Magnolia Court. Okay. Are you the only one there? No. My brother's attacking my family. Your dad is attacking your family? No, my brother.
The operator could hear the screaming and commotion in the background, and then a male voice picked up the phone and said, "Hello?" and the line went dead. Dispatchers traced the number and found that the call came from the house of 52-year-old David Bever. They tried calling him to find out what was going on, but he was not picking up the call. No one in the house was. David lived in a nice suburban house with his 44-year-old wife, April, and 7 children, ranging between 18 to 2 years. They included Robert, 18, Michael, 16, Crystal, 13, Daniel, 12, Christopher, 7, Victoria, 5, and Autumn, 2. David worked in the tech industry, while April was a homemaker who also homeschooled the children. The family did everything together and mostly kept to themselves. In fact, neighbors said that they would only see the children playing outside their backyard or mowing their lawn.
Anytime that I would take my kids to the park, my kids would run up to their fence and try to talk to them, and the kids would just turn around and even run from my kids and run back in the house.
April, who married David when she was only 15, was a huge Reddit fan and would constantly post under the username Aoki Mom. In her posts, she often talked about raising 7 children and homeschooling. In one post, she described herself as tired, happy, blessed. In another, she said that she would not change her children for anything in the world, saying in part, "I would never give up having any of my children so I could have more money. They are amazing people, and the world will benefit by having them in it. And nothing I could buy or invest in could compare to giving a person a chance to have a life." On the other hand, David was said to be physically and verbally abusive towards his children, and would sometimes throw them across the room when he was angry. On July 22nd, at around 11:30 p.m., Crystal had gone over to Robert and Michael's room to tell them that their mom wanted them to do the dishes. Crystal would later remember seeing her brothers wearing body armor and having multiple knives laying on the bed. She heard Michael ask his brother, "Should we do it now?" and Robert said yes. Michael then asked Crystal to come inside and see something on his computer screen. But when Crystal went in, Robert came up behind her with a knife and slit her throat. Crystal fought back, and he plunged the knife into her arms and abdomen. Still, she did not die, and managed to run to her younger sister's room and tell her to lock herself in the bathroom. Their mom heard the commotion and came up to check what was going on. When she realized what was happening, she tried to turn around and call the police, but Michael jumped on her and unleashed a frenzy of at least 48 knife strikes all over her body. The 2 killer brothers then went room by room, unleashing their attack on their family members. They hit their dad with a blunt object before stabbing him 28 times. They then found Christopher and Victoria hiding in the bathroom. To get them to open, Michael pretended that he was being attacked and asked them to open the door for him. Christopher and Victoria opened the door thinking they were saving their brother, but instead, Robert jumped in and thrust his knife on their bodies, finishing them off. Meanwhile, 12-year-old Daniel had locked himself in his room and had managed to call 911. Michael came and used the same strategy of pretending he was under attack to get his little brother to open. And when he did, Robert came in and mauled him to death.
Daniel was in his room, which is down the hall, and I was like, "Let me." How old's Daniel? I think he's 12. Okay. And I was like, "Let me in," and he let me in. He was sitting on the phone with the police. I grabbed the phone, which is my phone.
When this was going on, Crystal had somehow managed to get to the front door and opened it, hoping to set off the alarm. But the brothers had already turned it off. She ended up collapsing on the front lawn as she tried to go get help. When she came to, she found Michael dragging her back inside and heard her younger brothers screaming in the house. The police arrived around this time and found blood on the sidewalk and the front step. As they were banging the door, they heard a faint voice calling for help on the inside. At that moment, the police broke in and they found Crystal lying in a pool of red, barely alive. Crystal told the police that her brothers were the ones that had attacked her family before she was carried out into the waiting ambulance. As the police went around the house, they could not believe the brutality at which the 5 family members had been killed. There were wounds everywhere, including the face, chest, neck, arms, and abdomen. The only family member that was unharmed was 2-year-old Autumn, who was found sleeping soundly upstairs through the ordeal.
It's hard to just even imagine why someone would do something like that to a stranger, much less your family.
The 2 killer brothers had escaped through the back door and were hiding in the woods. However, the police quickly tracked them down using canine dogs, and they were both arrested and brought in for questioning. One of the detectives who arrested the boys would later say, "They weren't upset, they weren't distraught. It's almost like they had a sense of cockiness." Another detective said that one of the boys, probably Robert, had a smirk on his face. Police photos of the brothers when they were caught show them covered in mud and blood with their clothes torn, and they even appear to have some bits of flesh on them.
11:30 last night, the 911 call comes in. It's silent. No one on the line. When police arrive to investigate, they see 2 young men running out of the back door of the home. Canines soon track down 18-year-old Robert Bever and his 16-year-old brother in the woods behind the home. Inside, horror. 5 members of the brothers' family found stabbed to death. Their parents, David and April Bever, their 12 and 17-year-old brothers, and their 5-year-old sister. 2 siblings survived the rampage. A 13-year-old sister is in the hospital tonight, and the family's baby, a 2-year-old girl, the only one left unhurt.
Detectives interrogated the brothers separately as they tried to figure out what could have made them do such a horrible thing. Robert, who even seemed proud of what he did, confessed to everything. He said that he and his brother had been fascinated by serial killers and mass shooters for years, and that he believed taking the life of more than one person would make him a god. He said that he wanted to gain the kind of fame and notoriety that such criminals would often get. He said that he started planning to murder his family at the age of 13, and that he even got a job at a call center to earn money to buy the knives, body armor, helmets, guns, and ammunition. He said that their plan was to end their entire family, including their 2-year-old sister, decapitate their bodies, and throw the remains in trash bins, and then hide them in the attic of their home. He said they were planning to take 2 videos, one with the bodies to give to the police, and the other without the bodies or blood that they could post on YouTube. They then would steal the family car and go on a shooting spree around town, hoping to achieve a body count of at least 50 people. The detective who interviewed him would later testify that Robert was actually laughing and smiling while telling the story, and would get mildly excited at some parts. Robert's interview has never been released to the public, but Michael's has. He told detectives that it was his brother's idea and that he didn't want to do it, but Robert threatened him.
Your big brother's telling you he wants to be famous, and you guys are making these plans. Surely you want some of that fame too, right?
Yeah, I do want to do it with him because, like, he's going to do it no matter what. He says if I don't do it with him, they'll just kill me too. Or leave me there. So, do it with him.
Yeah.
So y'all have been planning this since 30th of June, you said?
Yeah.
That's the first time y'all talked about it?
Well, not the first time we talked about bullying or anything, but
He said that Robert had ordered body armor and collected knives months before the incident. He had also some guns delivered to a nearby shop, and 3,000 rounds of ammunition was to be delivered to the house the day after the incident. Michael kept going back and forth with the police, refusing to admit that he had killed anyone, but eventually he confessed to stabbing his little brother Christopher and his mom. He said that Robert was very specific about the plan. They were going to cut their family down like ninjas, with swift and silent blows. But when it all started, nothing went as planned, and they realized that it wasn't going to be that easy.
And this is your last chance to just kind of let us know, to be honest, to man up and tell us exactly what you did and start making it right.
I hit Christopher. I not stabbed Victoria with Daniel.
You did not stab Victoria?
Yeah, I tried to stab Mom.
You stabbed your mom?
I believe she was walking back.
Both Michael and Robert were charged with 5 counts of first-degree homicide and 1 count of assault and battery with intent to kill. Despite being only 16 when he committed the crime, Michael was also charged as an adult. Their sister, Crystal, who had survived the attack, testified against the two, saying that Michael and Robert talked for a year about ending their family and stealing money. She said that her brothers admired mass shooters, wishing more of them got away with their crimes. According to Crystal, the brothers would say that there were too many people in the world. Crystal said that she had told her mom about her brother's concerning behaviors, and that her mom had dismissed her by saying, boys will be boys. At first, both Robert and Michael had pleaded not guilty to the charges, but later, Robert changed his plea to guilty, so as to avoid getting the death sentence. He was given 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole. In July 2016, it was reported that Robert attempted to end his life by hanging with a bedsheet. He was discovered by a detention officer during a routine check and was cut down before anything happened. Michael's trial began in April 2018, and Robert came and testified in his brother's defense, saying that it was all his fault and that Michael was just going along with his plans. He claimed that he was responsible for all the deaths and that Michael did not kill anyone.
Robert was on the stand all day long today testifying in his brother Michael's defense. Robert said, looking back, it's unfortunate this plan ever came to fruition. He says, for a long time the plan wasn't real. It was just something he thought about to make himself feel better. Robert went through the entire chain of events of that night in detail. This was back in July of 2015. He talked about how it started, how it ended, taking responsibility for every death and saying he doesn't even remember seeing Michael holding a knife.
Robert did admit that Michael helped him by tricking his siblings to open the door for him. In the end, Michael's confession and the fact that he had tricked his siblings into being murdered swayed the jury. Michael was found guilty of all charges and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He is currently serving his time at Lexington Correctional Center, while Robert is at Joseph Hart Correctional. But things don't even end there. While in prison, Robert actually tried to attack prison staff with a sharp object. He just came up behind 2 workers with the weapon before he was restrained by the guards. While in jail before his trial, Michael kept a journal in which he drew some really disturbing images telling the story of what he and his brother did. This clearly shows that there is something mentally wrong with these 2 brothers, but psychiatrists who evaluated them could not find anything to explain what was really wrong with them. Now, Crystal and Autumn, the only surviving members of the Bever family, were adopted by the same family, so at least they are together. This horrifying incident continued to haunt Broken Arrow for years, with people on social media calling the house in which it happened evil. Then one day, 2 years after the incident, someone set the house on fire.
The Broken Arrow Fire Department says it got the call around 3:30 a.m. When crews arrived, the house was engulfed in flames. It took an hour for them to get it under control.
What do you think about this case? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.